Somewhere in Alaska right now, there is a person lying inside a tent, wide awake, listening. The walls of that tent are made of nylon, about as thick as a cheap windbreaker. And on the other side of that thin little wall, out in the dark, there might be 600 pounds of muscle that can move at 40 miles an hour, that can smell that person breathing from more than a mile away, and that has already, very quietly, made up its mind. Here's the part nobody tells you about a grizzly. The one that roars, slaps the ground, and stands up tall on two legs to look enormous. That one is bluffing. It's loud because it wants you to leave. It's putting on a show. The grizzly you actually have to worry about is the one that doesn't make a single sound. The one you never hear coming. Because by the time a grizzly has gone silent, it's not trying to scare you off anymore. It's already decided your food. And I want you to sit with that for a second, because it sets the tone for everything that's coming. This is a country where the wild never really left. It just moved in next door, into the lakes behind the houses, the trails where people jog before work, the warm space under the blanket you climbed into last night. We're going to meet about 20 of these animals. Some of them are exactly as terrifying as they look. But the strangest part, and we'll get there, is that the single animal that sends more Americans to the hospital than every bear, shark, and snake on this entire list combined has the soft brown eyes of a cartoon deer, the grizzly. So let's stay with that bear for a minute, because almost everything about it is a kind of practical joke that nature decided to play on us specifically. Start with the name we gave it. The grizzly is a subspecies of brown bear, and we took this animal, this exact animal, and we shrunk it down, stuffed it with cotton, sewed 2 button eyes onto its face, and put it in the crib next to sleeping babies. The teddy bear, we hand it to toddlers as the very first thing in the world they're taught to trust. Meanwhile, the real version stands up to 8 feet tall, weighs as much as a small car at 400 kilos, and can cover the length of a football field in about 6 seconds. It runs at roughly 40 miles an hour. Usain Bolt, at full sprint in the single fastest moment ever recorded by a human being, hit about 28. So when people say don't run from a bear, they're not giving you survival advice. They're just describing physics. You were never going to make it. Running only changes how the story ends, not whether it ends. Then there's the hump. If you've seen a grizzly, you've seen that big shoulder hump that makes its back look like a mountain range. Most people assume it's fat, a fuel tank like a camel. It is not. That hump is pure muscle, anchored straight into the front legs, and it exists for one reason: digging and striking power. It's basically a biological engine bolted onto the front of the animal, and the output of that engine is genuinely hard to picture. A single casual swipe, not even an angry one, carries enough force to break a large animal's spine or to remove a person's scalp in one motion, the way you'd peel the lid off a can, and the jaw. The bite comes in at around 1,100 pounds of pressure per square inch. To put that in something you can actually feel, that's enough to close around a bowling ball and crush it. The human thigh bone, the thickest, strongest bone in your entire body. The one engineers compare to reinforced concrete, gives way in that jaw like a breadstick. But here's the layer that the people who study this stuff find the most unsettling, and it goes back to where we started. There's a researcher named Stephen Herrero who spent his career going through these encounters, one by one, looking for the pattern. And he found one. He found that there are really 2 completely different bears wearing the same fur. There's the defensive bear, the one that got startled or felt cornered or is protecting cubs. That bear is all noise. It roars, it slams its paws down, it stands up, it huffs, it bluff charges and stops short. It's terrifying, but it's basically shouting at you to go away, and most of the time, if you do the right things, it lets you. And then there's the other one. The one that isn't surprised, isn't scared, and isn't defending anything. The one that has simply looked at you and quietly refiled you in its head, from creature to groceries. That bear does the opposite of everything. It goes completely silent. It stops performing. It moves in slow and low and patient. No roar, no warning, nothing for you to react to. which leads to the single most chilling rule that comes out of all of it. If a grizzly is loud, you still have a problem, but you have a chance. If a grizzly is quiet, you may already be part of its evening. And that's the note I want to leave the bear on, because it's the exact thing that separates the animal we're scared of from the animal that should scare us. We're wired to fear the roar. The roar was never the dangerous part. The polar bear. Now take everything we just said about that silent, deciding grizzly, the rare one, the one that's actually hunting, and imagine an animal where that isn't the rare version. That's the only version. That's the polar bear. This is the part people genuinely don't want to believe, so I'll just say it plainly. Every other large predator on this list has a reason it might come after a person. It got scared, you got too close, you walked between a mother and her young. The polar bear is the one animal in North America that will come after a human being for no reason other than the obvious one. It's hungry and you're meat. There's no anger in it. No territory, no misunderstanding. To a polar bear, a person standing on the ice is not a threat to be warned off. You're just the only warm thing on a very flat, very white plain, and it has all day. And the advertising did to this one exactly what it did to the grizzly, except somehow worse. We made it the gentle face of winter. The polar bear is the cuddly one that sits in the snow and shares a bottle of soda with its little cubs in the holiday commercials. The actual animal is a 600-kilo meat specialist with, by the measures we have, less hesitation about a human being than a great white shark. But it's the engineering that turns this from scary into something that feels almost unfair. First, that white coat. It isn't white, and it isn't even really fur in the way you're picturing. The hairs are hollow, clear little tubes that trap heat so completely that the animal barely leaks any warmth out into the world. Which means that on a military-grade thermal night vision camera, the kind that paints every living thing as a glowing hot smear in the dark, a polar bear can come back as almost nothing. A ghost. The most heat-efficient predator on the planet is also, by accident, close to invisible to the one tool we invented to see in the dark. Then the feet. The bottoms of its paws are covered in little bumps and rough pads that work like the soundproofing foam in a recording studio. So this thing, 600 kilos, the size of a piano, can run at 25 miles an hour across ice and snow without making a sound. Silent and nearly invisible. Take a second with that combination, and the nose finishes the job. Its sense of smell is the best radar in the animal kingdom, full stop. Some researchers believe it can pick up the scent of a single breath, or the sweat on a person's skin, from astonishing distances, and it can sniff out a living thing hidden under a meter of packed, solid ice. There is no hiding from it. You are a signal, and it is a receiver tuned to exactly your frequency. Oh, and that black nose, the one part of it that isn't camouflaged. On the final approach, hunters and researchers have watched polar bears lift a paw and cover it. They tuck the one dark spot on their body behind a white paw and slide forward on their bellies, erasing the last giveaway. The animal understands its own camouflage well enough to fix the gap in it. Here's the layer that's actually new, and it's not from the past. It's from right now. As the sea ice melts and the hunting gets harder, GPS data out of Alaska shows these bears doing something they didn't used to do. They're learning the towns. They're memorizing the layout of the cabins, the research stations, the little Arctic settlements. And at night, they've been recorded doing one specific thing: sitting down outside a door and waiting. Just sitting, facing the door, completely still. It's the same trick they use at a seal's breathing hole in the ice. Pick the spot the food has to come through and outpatience it. Except now the breathing hole is the front door and the seal is whoever's inside, the mountain lion. Here's a number to start with. In the time you've been watching this, statistically, you have probably been within a few hundred feet of one of these and had absolutely no idea. The mountain lion, also called the cougar, the puma, the catamount, depending on which part of the country is scared of it, is the reason that little prickle on the back of your neck exists at all. You know the one. You're walking alone on a trail or through a quiet park at the edge of town, and for no reason you can name, the hair on your neck stands up and you turn around. Nothing's there. You feel a little silly. The unsettling truth is that the feeling is older and smarter than you are, and a fair number of the people who got that feeling and turned around to face the empty trail were turning to face something that was, in fact, watching them. They just didn't see it. And this is the strange part. Turning around is very likely the thing that saved them, because the mountain lion does not fight you. It is not interested in a confrontation, and it knows it's smaller than the story it can end. So it doesn't come at your front. It comes from behind and from above if it can manage it, and it goes for one specific target with surgical precision. The base of the skull, the back of the neck, to disconnect the spine before the person it's landed on has even finished registering that anything happened. It's not built to overpower you. It's built to make sure there's never a fight in the first place. And here's the cruel little glitch in the system. A cougar is genuinely, instinctively scared of an upright human. A person standing tall, facing it, making noise, that reads as large, strange, dangerous, leave it alone. That fear is hardwired, and it's the only reason you and I get to use the hiking trails at all. But our modern lives accidentally found the cheat code to switch that fear off. The second you turn your back and start moving away fast, jogging, cycling, running, something flips in the cat's head. The upright human, the scary one, disappears, and what's left is just a shape, moving away at speed. And a shape moving away at speed is the single oldest definition of prey the animal carries. You stop being a person it's afraid of and become a thing it chases. You can't even blame the cat. You handed it the wrong cue. Then there's the way it follows you, which has a name that sounds almost gentle. Direct register. When a cougar walks a trail behind you, over dry leaves, over twigs, the exact stuff that should snap and crackle and give it away, its back paw lands in the precise dent its front paw just made. Every step, it walks in its own footprints so that the number of new sounds it makes drops to essentially zero. It isn't sneaking in the cartoon sense, creeping with exaggerated care. It's just built so that walking and silence are the same motion. It floats up the trail behind you, and the forest never tells on it. The hardest part to swallow comes from a long-running study out in California called the Santa Cruz Puma Project, where researchers put collars and cameras on these cats to see the world from their side of it. And the footage did something to the people watching it. Over and over, they found cougars lying calmly in the brush, 2 or 3 meters off the trail, close enough to touch, just watching people walk by. Hikers, joggers, parents with kids. Day after day, the same trails, the same people, none of them with the faintest clue. The cats would lie there, measure the human, sit right at the edge of the decision, and then let it go. Not out of friendliness, just a calculation that came out that particular day in the person's favor. So when people ask why mountain lions don't take more of us, given how many of us walk straight past them, that's the answer, and it's not a comforting one. It isn't that they can't, it's that most days they choose not to. We're not safe out there. We're spared. The moose. Let's do a quick experiment. Picture the most dangerous animal in the snowy forests of the northern United States. You're probably picturing something with fangs, a wolf, a bear, something that eats other things for a living. Now throw that picture out, because the animal that puts more people in the hospital up there than wolves and bears combined is standing in a pond, calmly chewing on a plant, looking like a cartoon that wandered out of a children's book. The moose is the largest member of the deer family, and the word large does it no favors. A big bull runs 600 to 700 kilos and stands taller at the shoulder than most professional basketball players before you even get to the antlers, which can spread wider than a doorway. And it eats grass, leaves, twigs, wet fungus, bark. That's the whole diet. Nothing on this animal is designed to come after you, which is exactly the trap, because people see all that, and their brain files it under gentle giant, and they walk toward it with a phone out, looking for the photo. They think they've found a big friendly Bambi with a hat rack on its head. What they've actually found is the single most short-tempered animal in the snow. Here's the thing people get catastrophically wrong. There's an old piece of folk wisdom that hoofed animals, horses, deer, that whole family, can only deliver a serious blow backwards, with the back legs, the classic mule kick. So people think if they're not standing behind it, they're fine. The moose did not get the memo. Its joints let it strike forward and out to the sides, straight ahead, at chest height, with hooves that land like the blade end of an axe. There's no safe angle. It can drop its head, throw a person down, and then do the thing that's genuinely hard to talk about calmly. It rears up and brings its full weight straight down through the front legs, over and over methodically, until whatever was a threat is no longer recognizable as one. It doesn't do it out of cruelty. It does it because that's the program. Neutralize completely, then walk away and go back to eating. And it has a particular grudge against us that the science finds fascinating. Researchers have measured the stress chemistry of these animals when they catch different smells on the wind. Wolf scent, their actual ancient enemy, spikes the heart rate, sets off the alarm. Fair enough. But here's the unsettling result. The smell of an ordinary human on a trail, just sweat and soap, and the dog at the end of a leash, can spike that same system just as hard, sometimes harder. Some researchers believe the moose has come to treat us as a top-tier threat all on our own, reacting to a hiker the way it reacts to a pack of predators, bracing for a fight before the person has even noticed there's a moose in the trees at all. It doesn't dislike you personally. It walked into the encounter already convinced you're the enemy. But the way the moose ends the most lives isn't in the woods at all. It's on the road, and it comes down to a horrible little detail of height. The moose's legs are absurdly, almost comically long, which means when a car hits one at speed, the bumper just takes the legs out from under it. The body, half a ton of animal, antlers and all, doesn't get thrown forward and away the way a deer would. It gets scooped up and comes straight back, through the windshield, into the front seats. In the rural north, there are something like 3,000 of these collisions a year. And they are, mile for mile, among the worst things that can happen to you on a highway. The animal that only ever wanted to eat a plant in a pond becomes, through pure geometry, one of the most catastrophic things you can meet at 60 miles an hour. The bison. Now here's one where we have actual numbers, and the numbers are embarrassing for us. Every year in the national parks, and especially in Yellowstone, the bison sends more people airborne than the bears. The wolves and the mountain lions put together, not close. And almost every single time, it happens the same way. A person decided that a 1,500-pound wild animal was basically a fuzzy cow in a petting zoo, walked up to it for a better photo, and found out, in about 1 second, that it wasn't. That's the whole problem with the bison. It runs the most effective disguise in North America, and the disguise is just standing there. It grazes. It chews slowly. It looks heavy and sleepy and harmless, like livestock that wandered off a farm. And your brain, running on instinct that's thousands of years old, takes one look and says cow, and cow means safe, and you relax. Meanwhile, this thing is not a cow. It's a wild animal that happens to weigh as much as a small pickup truck. And the gap between how dangerous it looks and how dangerous it is might be the widest of any animal on this list, because the part the photo doesn't capture is the acceleration. People assume that something that big and round must be slow. It is not slow. A bison goes from a dead, peaceful standstill to roughly 35 miles an hour almost instantly, 3 times faster than you can run. And it covers the gap before your brain has finished sending the back-away signal to your legs. By the time you've registered that the cow is moving, you're already part of the event. And when it makes contact, it doesn't really run you over so much as launch you. It drops that enormous boulder of a head, gets it under you, and throws, and people have been tossed 3-4 meters straight up into the air, end over end, before they come back down. The engineering behind that is genuinely strange. The bison evolved to ram head first, through brutal winters and into other charging bison, so it packed a massive band of armored muscle and ligament around the skull and shoulders, a built-in battering ram. It absorbs an impact that would shatter almost anything else and barely feels it. The trouble is that all of that force has to go somewhere. And when the thing on the other end of the collision is a person, the person's ribs and insides take 100% of an impact the bison itself is built to shrug off. The most quietly tragic part is that the bison warns you. It tells you clearly in a language every predator on Earth understands instantly. The tail goes up. There's a specific little flick and raised tail, a paw at the ground, a turn of the body, universal animal sign language for the next thing I do, you will not enjoy. And the finding that the people who study this keep coming back to is almost philosophical. We've lost the ability to read it. The signal still works. The bison is still broadcasting. We're just the one species standing in the field that no longer speaks the language. So a teenager films the cow wagging its tail, laughing, narrating it for the internet, right up until the cow stops wagging and the camera goes sideways into the dirt. The white-tailed deer. Okay, we've been building to this one since the very first minute, so let me finally just ask it straight. What is the deadliest animal in the United States? Not the scariest. The deadliest. The one that ends the most American lives year after year, decade after decade. Take a real guess before I say it. It's not the grizzly. It's not the shark or the gator or any snake. It's not the bison that just threw someone 4 meters in the air. The animal that quietly out-totals every fanged, clawed, venomous thing on this entire list, combined across decades, is the one with the gentlest face in the whole forest. It's Bambi. It is genuinely the white-tailed deer. And before you decide I'm cheating, that it's just car accidents, so it doesn't count, sit with the scale of it for a second, because the scale is the point. Traffic agencies put it at around 1.5 million collisions with these animals every year. A year. That's not a freak event. That's a steady, grinding fact of life in this country. And it leaves a couple hundred people not making it home annually, and tens of thousands more seriously hurt. The grizzly is a once-in-a-lifetime nightmare for almost everyone. The deer is a Tuesday. Here's the mechanism, and it's the saddest little design flaw. The deer has these incredible eyes for the dark. There's a mirror-like layer behind the retina, the same thing that makes a cat's eyes flash in a flashlight. And it lets the deer gather the tiniest scraps of moonlight in a black forest. Beautiful adaptation, perfect for the world it evolved in. Then we invented the headlight. And when a modern LED headlight hits that mirror at night, it doesn't just dazzle the deer, it completely overloads the system, like a camera flash going off 2 inches from your face in a dark room. The deer doesn't freeze because it's stupid or stubborn. It freezes because for a few critical seconds, it has gone totally blind and its legs have stopped taking orders. It is standing in the middle of the road, a 100-pound statue, not out of panic, but because the one organ it trusted most just got switched off by our technology. The phrase "deer in the headlights" is describing a real physical short circuit, and the deer almost never wins it. And just when you've settled into thinking of it as this soft, blameless, purely accidental danger, a victim of our cars more than anything, there's one last fact that I genuinely did not believe the first time I read it, and I want to leave you with it, because it's the kind of thing the rest of this video is built on at a research facility in Texas, one of those forensic sites where the science of how remains break down in nature gets studied out in the open. Night. Cameras were running to see which animals come and go, and they kept catching the white-tailed deer doing something it is absolutely not supposed to do. The deer were walking up to human remains and chewing on the bones, calmly, routinely, gnawing ribs for the minerals, the same way they'd work on a fallen antler, supplementing their diet through a hard winter. So the single most harmless-looking animal in America, the one we put on greeting cards, the one whose name is shorthand for innocence itself, turns out to be the one that out-totals every monster on this list. and when nobody's watching and the season is lean, doesn't draw quite as firm a line as you'd hope about what counts as food, which is a pretty good moment to stop trusting the gentle face. Because from here on out, the things we're going to look at don't even have one. The American alligator. There's a particular kind of place in Florida that should not exist, and yet there are thousands of them. A manicured lawn, a row of expensive houses, a golf course with the sprinklers ticking, and right in the middle of it, a pretty little pond with a black, glassy surface, the kind of water people barely glance at on their evening walk. And resting on the bottom of that pretty little pond, older than the houses, older than the state, older than the entire human species by about 8 million years, is a creature watching the neighborhood go by like a menu. The American alligator is a leftover from a world we never lived in. It shared the planet with the dinosaurs and then just kept going, basically unchanged, because the design was already finished. And here's the detail that should rearrange how you feel about those ponds. The alligator does not see the difference between the wild swamp it came from and the retention pond behind a gated community. To it, the pond is the swamp. The jogger is just a slower, two-legged thing that comes by at a predictable hour. We paved over its world, poured concrete around it, and named the streets, and it simply stayed, treating the whole development as its hunting ground, while retirees walk a few feet from the waterline in what is, hands down, the most relaxed false sense of safety on the planet. What it does when it makes contact is the part everyone's heard of and almost no one pictures correctly. The alligator has no chewing teeth. It can't bite pieces off, so it grabs a leg, a dog, whatever crossed the line, clamps that jaw shut like a bank vault, and then it does the thing that doesn't belong in a calm pond. It spins. The whole body rolls over and over along its own length, fast, using its own weight as leverage, and that rolling is how it works. It doesn't need to be clever about it. It just needs to hold on and turn. Now, the speed. People picture alligators as slow, and on land, over a distance, they basically are. But the launch is a different animal. Out of the water, in the first explosive burst, it can hit close to 30 miles an hour, and its jaw closes at nearly 3,000 pounds of pressure. That combination means the strike from the bottom of the pond reaches the person standing at the edge faster than the human reflex to jump back can even fire. The reflex loses the race. Every time. But the part that genuinely unsettles the people who study urban alligators is the patience, because it looks a lot like planning. In neighborhoods, these animals appear to learn our schedules. They notice routine. If someone rides past the same pond on a bike every evening at 6, researchers have watched the alligator sink and settle on the bottom at exactly that spot, hours early, and wait. It doesn't chase. It doesn't hunt in the active sense at all. It just knows what time you come by, picks the interception point, and lets you keep the appointment. The bull shark. Here's a fun one to ruin for you. You already know the one rule that keeps you safe from sharks. Stay out of the ocean. Don't go in the deep salt water, and the thing with the fin can't get you. Simple. Clean. The bull shark exists specifically to break that rule, and it breaks it more thoroughly than anything else in the water. Because the bull shark does not respect the boundary between the ocean and everything else. It swims out of the salt up into the brown, lazy rivers of the American interior, past the docks, under the bridges, into the muddy swimming holes where kids go on a hot afternoon, hundreds of miles from any coast. There are documented records of these animals moving an astonishing distance up the Mississippi system, by some accounts more than 1,000 kilometers inland, deep into the middle of the continent, into water where the textbook says a shark is flat out impossible. The horror of the bull shark isn't really its teeth. It's the location. It's something brushing your leg in a freshwater river, in a place where your entire brain is certain there is nothing in here that could. How it pulls that off is one of the strangest pieces of plumbing in nature. Drop an ordinary shark into fresh water and it dies. Its cells pull in water until the system fails, because everything in it is tuned for salt. The bull shark rebuilt its own kidneys and glands to recycle salt and hold its chemistry steady on the freshwater side of the line. It quietly re-engineered itself so it could go somewhere no other shark could follow and just live there, hunt there, hang around in the warm, shallow, familiar water where people actually swim, and its method in that murky water is built around the fact that nobody can see anything. It doesn't circle dramatically. In the Brown River it can't see well either, so it leads with a heavy, high-speed bump, a hit to the ribs or the leg of whoever's in the water. The person, stunned, loses their breath and spends the next second confused, trying to understand what just slammed into them out of nowhere. That second of confusion is the entire strategy. A couple of extra details that complete the picture. The bull shark is shaped for the shallows. It works the warm water around urban beaches, the part that only comes up to your waist, the part everyone assumes is the safe part. And some researchers point to its body chemistry to explain its reputation for a short fuse. By some measures, it carries unusually high levels of the hormones tied to aggression, which may be part of why it behaves the way it does. And after the big coastal storms, the hurricanes, the floods, trackers have watched something out of a nightmare. The sharks follow the floodwater inland, moving through the swollen canals and the drainage channels and the streets that have gone under, into the flooded edges of neighborhoods. The one place the rules swore you'd be safe turns out to be the one place it goes looking, the alligator snapping turtle. Let's stay in the warm, brown, shallow water of the American South, because there's something else down there. And this one doesn't chase, doesn't bump, doesn't roll. It doesn't really do anything at all. That's what makes it work. Picture the most ordinary summer scene there is. A slow river or a muddy lake. Kids splashing, a dog paddling around. Teenagers daring each other off a rope swing. And somewhere on the bottom, in the exact shallow spot everyone's wading through, is a rock. Except it isn't a rock. It's a reptile the size of a coffee table that weighs as much as a grown adult, sitting completely still, covered in mud and algae, mouth open, doing the one thing it is supremely good at: nothing. For hours, for days, waiting for something alive to put a foot down in the wrong place. The alligator snapping turtle is a study in giving up everything for one purpose. Think about what a turtle is supposed to do when something scary shows up. The most famous instinct in the animal kingdom, the thing a 5-year-old can tell you. It pulls its head and legs into the shell and waits for the danger to pass. This animal threw that whole plan away. Its shell is on purpose far too small to hide in. It physically cannot tuck itself away. At some point in its history, it abandoned the turtle's entire defensive identity and put 100% of its evolution into offense instead. It can't retreat, so it doesn't. It just lies there as a trap, and if you touch it, it answers. And the answer is the strangest jaw on this list. It has no teeth to speak of. What it has is a beak, a hard, hooked beak of pure keratin and bone, and it works exactly like a heavy pair of garden shears. The lower part overlaps the upper, and the whole thing is built for one motion. A single clean cut through whatever's between the blades. It isn't designed to grip or to hold. It's designed to take a finger or a toe off in one closing, the way you'd snip through a carrot stick, and the close happens in a fraction of a second your nervous system can't even perceive. By the time the pain signal reaches your brain, the event is already over and the turtle has gone back to looking like a rock. The detail that pushes it from strange to deeply unsettling comes from radio tracking. Biologists tagged big males to map where they like to settle, expecting them to avoid the loud, busy human parts of the water. They found the opposite. The largest, oldest individuals frequently chose to anchor themselves in exactly the shallow holes that people pick as their favorite swimming and diving spots. The popular, well-known, everybody goes there places. Living for years as something close to a biological landmine, parked invisibly under the same feet that pass over it all summer, never once needing to be noticed. The cottonmouth. There's a sentence people repeat to calm themselves down around snakes, and it's mostly true, which is why it's dangerous. Don't worry, It's more afraid of you than you are of it. For almost every snake in America, that's a fair bet. The cottonmouth, also called the water moccasin, is the one that hears that sentence and decides it's not interested. Most water snakes do exactly what the comforting sentence promises. The giant shadow of a standing human falls across the water and they vanish, straight down to the dark bottom, gone, conflict avoided. The cottonmouth, more often than not, does the opposite. You come around the edge of its patch of swamp, and instead of slipping away, it coils up, lifts its head out of the water, and opens its mouth wide to show you the inside, which is a startling, pale cottony white, the color that gives it its name. It's a display, a warning, a stand-its-ground gesture, a small animal telling a creature many times its size that it would genuinely rather have the argument than back down. And sometimes it doesn't just hold the line, it floats toward you, pushing into your space to make the point physically. Its body is built to back up that confidence in a way most snakes can't. A normal water snake swims low, mostly submerged. The cottonmouth inflates oversized lungs and rides high, its whole body visible on the surface like a floating branch, aimed and ready, traveling on top of the water instead of under it. And it has a special muscular seal at the back of its throat that closes off its airway completely, which means it can do the whole thing underwater. It can strike, make contact, and deliver venom while fully submerged, without taking in a drop of river water or coming up for air. It is, genuinely, comfortable fighting in the one environment where you are at your absolute worst, and it doesn't hold back on the dose. Where a lot of vipers carefully ration their venom, the cottonmouth tends to commit, delivering a heavy load of the tissue-destroying kind, the sort that breaks down cells and stops the blood from clotting. The lasting damage from a serious encounter can be severe. Deep scarring, lost muscle function, the kind of injury that changes how a limb works for good. Now, and I want to be fair here, because the cottonmouth has a worse reputation than it fully deserves. A researcher named Whit Gibbons actually put the "they chase you" legend to the test. His team used a fake boot on the end of a long arm to step on wild cottonmouths in the field, the way a person blundering through the swamp accidentally would, and measured what the snakes actually did. The result is interesting and a little chilling at the same time. The snakes didn't, in fact, chase. The aggressive pursuit story is mostly a myth, but a large share of them also refused to flee. They held their ground and struck the boot, again and again, standing firm against a giant rather than giving an inch. So the cottonmouth isn't the villain that hunts you down through the woods. It's something stranger, and in its own way, more stubborn. A snake that simply will not be bullied off its piece of the water, and treats a thing the size of a person as a fight worth having, which, in a swamp where the deck is already stacked against you, amounts to almost the same problem. The feral hog. Here's a thought that sounds like a joke until you sit with it. Take the soft, pink-friendly farm pig, the one from the children's books, the one that says oink, the one we raise behind a fence and feed slop to. Let a few of them loose in the woods, and within a single generation you get one of the most destructive, aggressive animals on the continent. Same animal, same DNA. We didn't breed a monster, we just stopped supervising one. This is the part that genuinely messes with people. The feral hog and the chubby pink pig on the farm are the same species. There is no difference in the blueprint. But domestication was only ever a thin coat of paint over a very old wild animal, and the wild animal is still under there, waiting. When a farm pig escapes, or its grandparents did, and has to survive on its own in the brush of Georgia or Texas, the paint comes off shockingly fast. In a matter of months, not centuries, the body changes. It grows long, dark, coarse bristles. It puts on heavy muscle across the shoulders. The face stretches out. The tusks come in, and the temperament underneath wakes all the way up. It reverts, as the researchers put it, switching old, dormant genetic programs back on, until the gentle livestock animal is gone and something built for the Ice Age is standing in the dark. grunting, very much not afraid of you, and it doesn't come at you alone. Feral hogs move in groups. They call them sounders, and the behavior people on the receiving end describe is a kind of mobbing. A lone hunter out in the brush, even an armed one, can find the whole group turning on him at once when it gets agitated, a wall of them coming in low and fast. And low is the operative word, because that's where the danger is. They go for the legs. The tusks come up and across at shin and thigh height, and the goal is simple and old and effective. Open up the lower leg, take the person off their feet, and once they're down, the rest of the sounder is right there. It is, by any measure, one of the more frightening situations a person can find themselves in out in the rural dark. Surrounded, in the brush, by a dozen of these things, none of which feel they have any reason to back off. The tusks themselves are a small piece of natural engineering that's honestly hard to believe. They never stop growing and they never go dull, because the animal is constantly sharpening them automatically, just by living. The upper tusks and the lower tusks are positioned so they grind against each other every time the hog opens and closes its mouth. Every bite of food, every grunt, every breath, the lower set is being honed against the upper set like a knife against a steel. So the hog walks around with a permanently maintained set of blades it never has to think about, kept razor ready by the simple act of eating, and they're sharp enough to go through tough denim and a boot and into what's underneath in a single pass. Now the number? Because the number is the whole reason this is a crisis and not a curiosity. By some estimates, there are more than 6 million feral hogs roaming the United States, tearing up farmland across the Midwest and the South, and they breed at a rate that's almost impossible to keep up with. The math is genuinely grim for the people fighting it. Government studies have found that you'd have to remove around 70% of the entire population every single year just to keep it from growing. Not to shrink it, just to hold the line. So there are state programs with hunters working from helicopters year-round for that exact reason. Not to win, because winning isn't on the table, but to keep the wave from rising any higher. It's one of the only animals on this list where the official goal isn't safety or control. It's just, please, no more of them than last year. And one last detail that puts a fine point on what these animals actually are. Out at those forensic research sites, the open-air facilities where scientists study how remains return to nature, the night cameras have caught the sounders coming through. And what they do is total. A group of hogs will arrive at a site and, over the course of a couple of nights, leave almost nothing behind. They consume it all, working through the night with a thoroughness that genuinely unsettled the researchers, erasing in hours what other scavengers take weeks to touch. There's no anger in it. It's not personal. It's just an animal that we made soft, set loose, and watched turn all the way back into what it was before we ever got involved. The urban coyote, coy wolf, picture a nice evening in the suburbs, Los Angeles, or the edge of New York, doesn't matter. Trimmed lawns, streetlights flickering on, kids on a playground, a little dog off its leash, parents half watching, and at the dark edge of the grass, just past where the streetlight reaches, a pair of yellow eyes, sitting completely still, doing math. That's the picture I want you to hold. Because the unsettling truth of the modern coyote is that it has figured out our neighborhoods better than most of the people living in them. The coyote was never supposed to be here, in the city, in these numbers. And the story of how it got here is, frankly, a little bit our fault and a little bit poetic. For about a century, this country spent enormous effort and enormous money trying to wipe out the wolf. Shooting, poisoning, clearing the land of every large predator we could find. And we mostly succeeded. We emptied out the top of the food chain. But nature doesn't leave a seat like that empty for long. And the coyote, smaller, smarter, more flexible, slipped right into the gap we'd made. We removed its only competition and handed it a continent. The coyote responded by doing better than it had ever done in its history. We tried to erase the wild canine from America, and instead, we promoted one. And on the East Coast, it did something even stranger. It changed. As coyotes spread east, they bred with the last remaining wolves and with stray domestic dogs along the way. And the result is an animal some people call the coy wolf. It's a genuine mix, bigger than a regular coyote, with more of a wolf's size and jaw strength. The coyote's street-smart caution, and because there's dog in the family tree, far less of the natural fear of humans that used to keep its ancestors at a distance. It's a predator assembled out of 3 different animals. And the one trait it lost in the blending is the one that used to protect us, the instinct to stay away. You can see that lost instinct in how it behaves now. Modern urban coyotes don't reliably run from a shouting human anymore, and some have developed tactics that are genuinely cunning. There's a documented trick where a coyote will play the part of a friendly, submissive dog out in the open under a streetlight, wagging its tail, inviting the family pet over to say hello. The dog trots over, and when it follows its new friend into the shadows, the rest of the group is waiting in the dark. They've also grown bold enough to circle small children at the edges of yards and playgrounds. The kind of behavior that, 20 years ago, you simply would not have seen. But the detail that I can't get out of my head comes from a long-running study in Chicago called the Cook County Coyote Project, where researchers put GPS collars on the city's coyotes to follow their movements. First, the scale. They estimate there are, conservatively, more than 4,000 coyotes living inside greater Chicago, in the alleys, the train tunnels, the cemeteries, the gaps between buildings, moving through a city of millions of people who almost never see one in daylight. They've become ghosts. And then the part that genuinely sounds made up. The GPS data showed that the coyotes had learned the traffic. They memorized the rhythm of the intersections. They wait in the alleys at night and watch for the lights to change, and when the cars stop at the red, they cross, calmly in the crosswalk with the signal, and continue on. They reverse-engineered the one piece of city infrastructure that's supposed to organize human movement and turned it into a tool for getting around their hunting grounds. We built the traffic lights to keep ourselves safe. They read the manual, the Africanized honeybee. We tend to think of bees as the gentle ones, the symbol of flowers and summer and a fragile little planet that needs them. So it's worth saying clearly that this particular bee, the one people nicknamed the killer bee, and for once the nickname earned itself, is not a creature that nature carefully shaped over millions of years. It's an accident, a laboratory mistake that got out the door in the 1950s and has been working its way across the Americas ever since. It's a man-made problem wearing the costume of a peaceful insect. Here's how the accident happened. Researchers were trying to breed a better honeybee, more productive, suited to a warmer climate, by crossing European honeybees with a more aggressive African subspecies. Some of the experimental bees escaped, and out in the wild, the aggressive traits won. The hybrid spread north, hive after hive, generation after generation, and it carries the same venom as an ordinary honeybee. Drop for drop, no more toxic. What's different is the temper, and the temper is the whole story. Bump into an ordinary European honeybee hive, and a handful of bees might come out, give you a couple of stings, and go back to work. Disturb an Africanized hive, and disturb can be as small as starting a lawnmower too close, or letting the vibration of footsteps carry into the ground near them, and you get something closer to a military response. They pour out by the thousands, and they don't just defend the immediate area and stop. They commit. They will follow a person in a furious cloud for more than a quarter mile, long past the point where any reasonable insect would have given up and gone home. The defining trait of this bee is that it does not accept that you've left. And the reason they're so terrifyingly coordinated comes down to a chemical signal that works like a targeting laser. When the first bee stings you, say on the forehead, it gives up its own life in doing it, but it leaves behind a tiny drop of oil with a sharp, distinct smell, a bit like bananas. That smell is an alarm signal, And to the thousands of other bees boiling out of the hive, it lights you up. It marks the exact spot, so they don't sting you randomly all over. They home in again and again on that one marked square inch, every new bee drawn to the same flag the first one planted. At full fury, a colony can throw 3,000 to 5,000 bees at a single target at once. And that's where the real danger lives. Not in one sting, but in hundreds all at once, flooding the body with enough venom that the system, trying to filter it, can be overwhelmed and start to fail, a danger that can persist even after the person has been pulled to safety and the bees are gone. There's one last piece. And it's the part that reveals these things aren't just angry. They're tactically smart, which is somehow worse. The classic movie advice is to jump in water, dive into a pool, hold your breath, wait them out, and you're safe. Entomologists who've studied Africanized bees say it doesn't work, and the reason is genuinely chilling. The bees don't lose interest and leave when you go under. They hover in a patient cloud, right over the surface of the water, directly above where you went down. They seem to understand the one thing you cannot change about yourself, that you have to breathe. And the moment your face breaks the surface to pull in air, they're waiting for it. So the swarm that we created by accident in a lab trying to make a slightly better honey jar turns out to have the patience to sit on top of the water and time its move to your own lungs. Of everything we've talked about so far, this is the one we can't blame on the wild. We built it. The Western diamondback rattlesnake. Start with the sound because the sound is the whole tragedy of this animal. That dry, buzzing rattle is one of the most recognizable warnings in nature, and that's exactly what it is, a warning. The rattlesnake grew it specifically so it would never have to use the rest of itself. It's a courtesy. It's the snake saying, as plainly as an animal can, I'm right here. Please don't take another step. This ends badly for both of us. The rattle is the most polite thing in the desert. The Western diamondback is the heavyweight of American snakes, not the most toxic, but the one behind a large share of the serious encounters across Texas and the Southwest. Simply because it's big, it's common, and it doesn't have the habit some snakes have of slipping quietly away. When a person comes too close, a boot near a sun-warmed rock, a hand reaching somewhere it shouldn't, the diamondback often doesn't retreat. It draws back into that coiled S shape, lifts its head, runs the rattle, and holds its ground. It would genuinely rather you just left. The problem is almost never the snake. The problem is the person who hears the rattle and instead of backing away, leans in, to look, to poke, to get the photo. The warning system works perfectly. It's the audience that fails. The strike itself is built around a sense we don't have. On the snake's face, between the eye and the nostril, there are two small pits, heat sensors so fine that the snake effectively sees warmth. On a black desert night with no moon, the snake doesn't need to see you in the ordinary way at all. It reads the heat coming off your skin like a glowing outline in the dark, and it aims at that. And the strike is faster than your reflexes are wired to handle. The whole motion, coil to contact, happens in a fraction of a second, far quicker than the time it takes you to flinch. By the time your body has begun to startle, the snake has already finished and pulled back. And the venom is the part that makes the diamondback different from the snakes that work on the nervous system. This isn't a quiet, painless kind. It's the tissue-destroying type. It breaks down the cells around the wound, stops the blood from clotting properly, and goes to work on the area from the inside. The lasting cost can be severe. Serious, slow-healing damage to the limb, and in the worst cases, the loss of fingers or part of a foot. It's not a subtle venom. It announces itself. Now there's one last idea about this snake that I want to give you carefully, because it's a hypothesis, not a settled fact, and some researchers find it compelling while others are skeptical. The thought goes like this. Across the rural Southwest for generations, people have dealt with rattlesnakes by removing the ones they hear, the loud ones, the ones that announce themselves with that honest buzzing warning. The quiet snakes, the ones that happen to rattle less or stay silent, get passed by and survive. And if that pressure has been running long enough, the argument goes, we may be slowly, accidentally tipping the odds in favor of snakes that keep their mouths shut. In other words, by removing the polite ones, we might be breeding for the silent ones. It's debated, and it's far from proven. But it's a haunting thought, that the warning sound that saved so many people might, over time, be something we're quietly editing out ourselves. The brown recluse. I want to drop my voice for this one, because the brown recluse doesn't deserve drama. It's the opposite of drama. It's the quietest, most overlooked animal on this entire list, and that's precisely the point of it. Every other thing we've talked about announces itself. The roar, the rattle, the swarm, the splash. The recluse announces nothing. It's the one that's already in the house, in the dark, folded into the soft, warm, private corners of your life, and it has no interest in being noticed at all. Let's get the look out of the way, because the look is the first surprise. When people imagine a dangerous spider, they picture something big and hairy and dramatic. A tarantula, something with weight and menace. The recluse is none of that. It's small, it's thin. It's a pale, unremarkable little brown spider, the kind you'd flick off a shelf without a second thought, with legs like threads and a body smaller than a coin. There is nothing about it that says, "Be careful," and yet it's one of the very few spiders in the country that can do real, lasting harm to a person, and it manages it specifically because it looks like nothing worth worrying about. Here's the thing about how harm actually happens, and it tells you everything about this animal. The recluse almost never goes after anyone. It can't really. It has no interest in people and no instinct to come at something a million times its size. Nearly every serious encounter happens by pure, sad accident, and almost always indoors. The spider crawls into a shoe left by the door, or a shirt that's been on the floor, or the warm folds of a bed. And then a person with no idea it's there puts the shoe on, pulls the shirt over their head, rolls over in their sleep. The spider, suddenly pressed against skin with nowhere to go, does the only thing it can. And most of the time, the person doesn't even feel it. They get the harm by trapping it against themselves, by accident, in their own clothes, in their own bed. What the venom does is genuinely strange, and it's not the kind of strange you see in the movies. It doesn't shut down your nervous system. Instead, it carries an enzyme, sphingomyelinase D, if you want the name, that breaks down the walls of the cells right where it lands and, in some cases, sends the body's own defenses into a kind of confused overreaction, turning them on the surrounding tissue. The result, when it goes badly, is a slow, sinking wound, an area of skin that breaks down and is slow, sometimes very slow, to heal, occasionally needing real medical work to clean up. It's quiet and it's often painless at the start, and that's the unsettling part. The harm gets going before you've even registered that anything touched you. But here's where I have to be honest, because the truth about the recluse is more interesting than the horror story, and it's a perfect note to end on. The recluse has a reputation far scarier than the reality, and there's one study that proves it beautifully. A researcher named Rick Vetter looked into a single home in Kansas, an ordinary family home, people living their normal lives, sleeping in their beds every night. And when the spiders in that house were actually counted, the number was staggering. More than 2,000 brown recluses living in the walls, the attic, the quiet corners. 2,000, and the family living on top of all of them for years had essentially no serious problems. They were sharing the house with a small army of the most feared spider in America, and the spiders simply kept to themselves, which flips the whole story. The recluse isn't the monster waiting in the dark to come for you. It's a shy, anxious little thing that wants nothing to do with you, sharing your walls in numbers you'd never believe, and the rare time it does harm, it's almost always because the two of you ended up pressed together by accident, both of you equally unhappy about it. The Arizona bark scorpion. Picture the most ordinary safe moment there is. It's late in Arizona. A person comes in from the heat, shuts the front door, turns the lock. That little click that means the day is over, and the outside is outside now. They shower. They turn off the lights. They lie down in a clean bed under a smooth white ceiling. Everything dangerous is out there, behind the locked door. The only thing they don't know is that the ceiling, the smooth white ceiling a few feet above their face, is not empty. The Arizona bark scorpion broke the one rule we all quietly rely on, that danger crawls on the ground. This one climbs, while the big heavy desert scorpions stay down in the sand where they belong. The bark scorpion went vertical. It's a specialist at it. It slips through window screens and vents and the tiny gaps around pipes. It walks straight up smooth painted walls. And this is the part that genuinely changes how you'll look at a room. It can hang upside down and walk across a ceiling, so the encounters don't happen out in the desert, boot to sand. They happen indoors at night, when the thing loses its grip on the ceiling and comes down onto a bed, onto a face, onto a sleeping person who did everything right and locked the door. And of course, it's the small one. This is the recluse's trick all over again. Next to the big, dramatic, frightening-looking desert scorpions, the thick black ones that look like they mean business. The bark scorpion is thin and pale and almost dainty, the kind of thing you'd assume was the harmless version. It is, in fact, the only scorpion in the entire United States whose sting is a serious medical matter. The scary-looking ones are mostly bluster. The one that actually warrants the trip to the hospital is the little one you'd overlook. What its venom does is unlike anything else on this list, because it doesn't break the body down. It hijacks the way the body feels. The sting itself often leaves little to see. No big swelling, no wound. Instead, the venom goes to work on the nervous system and scrambles the volume on the body's pain sensors, cranking them to maximum. People who've been through it describe something that sounds almost unreal. In the hours afterward, the lightest brush of an air conditioning breeze across the skin, or the soft weight of a bedsheet on an arm, gets translated by the overloaded nerves into something sharp and electric and overwhelming. The harmless touch becomes the worst part. The venom doesn't hurt you so much as it turns the entire surface of your skin into an alarm that won't switch off. And in small children especially, it can do more than that, bringing on real respiratory trouble and convulsions. Which is why this little pale scorpion is taken so seriously where it lives. Here's the number, and then the detail that'll keep you up. In Arizona alone, poison control fields, well over 10,000 calls a year tied to this one animal. A steady stream of people, many of them indoors, many of them in bed, finding out the hard way that the ceiling had a tenant. And the detail: pest specialists hunt these things using ultraviolet light, because under a black light, a bark scorpion lights up an eerie, glowing neon green. It can't help it. Its shell just fluoresces. So in the dark, with a UV lamp, the invisible becomes visible all at once. And what those specialists have found inside the walls of ordinary homes is the thing I'll leave you with. They don't always live alone. To wait out the cold months, bark scorpions gather, and inside the hollow drywall of a single nice, quiet suburban house, there can be a cluster of 40 or 50 of them, packed in together, glowing green in the dark. Stacked just on the other side of the wall, the family is leaning against while they watch television. The door's still locked. It was always the wrong wall to be looking at. So here's where we are. You've made it past the grizzly and the silent polar bear. You've kept your distance from the bison and somehow guessed the deer. You've stayed out of the alligator's pond. You've respected the rattlesnake's warning. You've checked the ceiling for the scorpion. You've survived every big, loud, frightening thing on this list. And now I want to take you somewhere quieter, because the animals that actually take the most from us, globally, by an enormous margin, aren't any of the ones you can see coming. They're the ones you can barely see at all. We're going to end small. And then we're going to end smaller than that. The Portuguese man-o'-war. You've been trained your whole life to scan the water for the wrong thing. You watch for the fin, the dark triangle slicing the surface, the shape every movie taught you to fear. Nobody ever taught you to watch for a thread, a single, clear, hair-thin thread drifting in the foam that can lash across your leg like a live wire. The Portuguese man-o'-war is the one that gets the warm, beautiful vacation beaches, Florida, Hawaii, the places people travel to specifically to relax. And the first strange thing about it is that it isn't really chasing anyone. It has no eyes. It doesn't swim. It can't hunt in any active sense at all. It just floats, pushed by the wind and the current, dragging an enormous, near-invisible net of tentacles through the shallow water where people wade and surf and splash. It doesn't come for you. You swim into it. And when a swimmer drifts blindly into those trailing threads, they get wrapped in something that delivers a pain people describe as breathtaking, sharp, deep, and immediate. And here's the part that genuinely bends your brain. It isn't even one animal. The man-o-war looks like a single creature, a glowing blue-purple float like a pretty balloon riding the surface, but it's actually a colony. It's thousands of tiny organisms, clones, that grew together and fused into one body, each with a single job. Some exist only to keep the whole thing afloat. Others exist only to trail down into the water and deliver the venom. It's not an individual that's hunting you. It's a committee of microscopic specialists that merged into the shape of one animal, and not one of them has a brain or a plan. It works entirely on contact, which is the next horror, because on contact means it doesn't need to be alive or aware or even attached to the rest of itself. The tentacles are lined with millions of microscopic stinging capsules, each one loaded like a tiny spring under tension. They don't fire because the animal decides to. They fire because something touched them. A purely mechanical trigger. Brush against one, and the physical pressure of your own skin sets off the springs, firing venom into you instantly, with no thought involved on either end. And the threads that carry those capsules can stretch an astonishing distance, by some accounts 30 to 50 meters trailing behind the float, forming long invisible curtains of pain hanging in the water that a swimmer has no way to see. On a hot holiday weekend, a single American beach can log thousands of these encounters in a matter of days. But the detail that should change how you walk on a beach is what happens after one washes up. Say the waves throw a man-o-war onto the sand, and it dries out under the sun for a week, shriveling down into what looks like a scrap of dead blue plastic. It is not finished. Those stinging capsules are still loaded, still under tension, still purely mechanical. They don't need the animal to be alive. So when a barefoot kid steps on that dried-up blue scrap on the sand, days or weeks after the creature itself stopped existing, the pressure of the foot sets off the springs exactly as if it were fresh and fires the venom straight into the soul. It's the closest thing in nature to stepping on a tiny landmine that's been sitting there, patient and harmless looking, long after the thing that made it is gone. The Lone Star tick. Let's get even smaller and even quieter, and let's get personal, because this next one doesn't take your limb or your breath. It takes something you wouldn't even think to put on a list of things that can be taken. It takes hamburgers, steak, bacon. It can reach into your life and quietly switch off your ability to eat meat forever. And it does it from a creature the size of a sesame seed. The Lone Star tick, named for the single pale dot on the female's back, doesn't leap, doesn't fly, doesn't chase. Its entire hunting strategy is one of the most patient things in nature, and it has a name: questing. The tick climbs to the tip of a blade of grass or the edge of a leaf, and it just waits. It holds its front legs stretched out and open, completely still, sometimes for days, hanging there in the warm air with its arms out. And when a warm body brushes past, a deer, a dog, your bare calf on a summer walk, it grabs on. No bite you'd notice, no sting, nothing. It simply transfers from the grass to you, climbs to somewhere soft and hidden, and settles in. And then it does something almost gentle, which is the trap. Before it feeds, it numbs the spot. Its saliva carries a mild anesthetic, so the bite doesn't hurt, doesn't itch, doesn't announce itself. You can carry one around for a long time and never feel a thing. That painlessness is the whole problem, because it means you don't find it, don't brush it off, don't react. It gets all the time it needs. Here's where it turns strange. As it feeds, the Lone Star tick can introduce a sugar molecule into your bloodstream. The researchers call it alpha-gal. That sugar is a completely normal thing to find in mammals. It's in beef, in pork, in most red meat. Your body has just never encountered it in your own blood before. And in some people, the immune system, seeing this sugar where it doesn't belong, decides it's a threat and learns to attack it. The bite heals. The tick is long gone. But weeks or months later, the person sits down to a steak, and their own immune system, now primed against that sugar, treats the meal as an invader. The reaction can be serious. Hives, swelling, real trouble breathing, all triggered by a hamburger, by a body that's been quietly reprogrammed to treat meat as the enemy. And the scale of it is the part that surprised even the doctors. This isn't a rare tropical curiosity. By some estimates, the number of Americans affected by this meat allergy has climbed toward roughly 450,000, a wave of people across the country who developed it seemingly out of nowhere. Many with no idea that the cause was a tick bite from a walk they took months earlier. There's a particular irony to it, too. This is a country that loves its meat. The steakhouse, the barbecue, the burger as a national symbol. And the thing capable of taking that away isn't a predator with teeth. It's a speck on a blade of grass, with its little arms held out, waiting for a leg to walk by. The mosquito. And so we arrive at the end, at the smallest thing of all, and at the one that makes the entire rest of this list look almost beside the point. Think about everything we've covered. The bear that can move at 40 miles an hour, the bull shark 1,000 kilometers up a river, the bison, the rattlesnake, the silent cat on the trail. You could survive every one of them, outwit them, outrun the situation, get lucky, and then sit down on your own back porch on a warm evening, completely safe, and meet the animal that ends more human lives than all of the others on Earth combined, ever, throughout all of history. It weighs about 2 milligrams. You can end it by clapping your hands. It is the most pathetic, most easily crushed thing in this entire video, and it is, by a margin that isn't close, the most dangerous animal alive. It finds you the same way the last two did, not by sight, but by chemistry. It reads the carbon dioxide you breathe out and the faint trace of lactic acid coming off your skin. And in total darkness, those signals make you glow on its sensors like a lighthouse. And the tool it uses isn't the simple needle everyone pictures. Tucked inside that thin mouthpart are several separate microscopic instruments, some of them edged like tiny saws that work the skin open gently, others that slip in the numbing agent and draw the blood up. It's a precise little kit, and it's so delicate you usually don't notice it's been used until the itch shows up later. But the mosquito itself was never the danger. It's only the delivery. And the thing it can deliver here, a virus that causes a swelling of the brain called Eastern equine encephalitis, is one of the grimmest passengers in nature. The virus does what almost nothing else can. It slips past the body's most guarded border, the barrier that's supposed to keep the brain sealed off and protected, and it gets inside, and it causes the brain to swell against the unyielding bone around it. The numbers are stark. Among the people who become critically ill from it, by some estimates around a third do not recover. And of those who do pull through, roughly half are left with serious permanent damage, lasting harm to how they move, how they think, how they live, for the rest of their lives. From a single bite, on a porch, on a nice evening, from the flimsiest creature in the woods. And I'll leave you with the strangest fact I came across in all of this, the one that sounds like science fiction, and is the reason the mosquito is the last word here. Because it turns out the virus isn't just hitching a ride. Researchers studying how these pathogens spread found that the virus actually reaches into the mosquito itself and changes it. It alters the insect's own nervous system. It appears to switch off the mosquito's sense of being full, of being satisfied, and it stresses the insect in a way that keeps it restless, driven, searching. The virus, in other words, reprograms its own ride. It turns the mosquito into something that can never quite stop looking, never settle, never feel finished. An endlessly hungry courier, kept hunting by the very thing it carries, until it finds the next warm, breathing human to hand the passenger to. That's the one that's out there tonight. Not the bear, not the cat on the trail, the small, tireless thing at the edge of the porch light, carrying something that wants, more than anything, to find you.